Don't you dare come to my graduation ceremony. If a plain old lady like you shows up, you'll be the laughing stock of everyone. It's my big day, so stay away." Emily's words cut through me, making me dizzy. She clearly doesn't see me as family. I'm just an embarrassment to her. "Hey, old lady, where are you right now?" Emily's screech pierced my ears as soon as I pressed the call button. Her tone was hurried and anxious, bordering on panic. "Leaving a silly note like that and thinking you'll get away with it. Where are you? Come home right now." I could also hear my husband Mark's frantic voice in the background. "My name is Linda Johnson. I'm a 39-year-old housewife, juggling a part-time office job at a local real estate agency, raising Emily, and managing household chores for over a decade. I married Mark 12 years ago, and he had Emily from his previous marriage. We met at the construction company where I worked before we got married. He was in sales. Despite the tough environment, Mark always had a smile and a positive attitude, which I admired. I once recommended a product he was selling to my company, and his company got the contract. That led to us going out for meals several times, deepening our relationship, and eventually he proposed. I happily accepted, quit my job, and started preparing for our wedding. Just before the wedding, Mark confessed that he was living alone with his 6-year-old daughter. At first, I thought it was a lie. It was hard to believe. But it was true. I met Emily a week before the ceremony. She was shy, hiding behind Mark and not coming out in front of me. I decided I would live with her and make her a respectable adult. I committed to taking care of her until she graduated from high school. Her anxious eyes peeking out from behind Mark haunted me, and I felt compelled to marry him. It was my first marriage, and my family was strongly against it. My father was particularly furious, saying it was nonsensical and that I was being mocked. But I went against their wishes and married Mark. If I had listened to my parents, I might have avoided the hell that was about to begin. It's been 12 years since that marriage. Emily is now 18 and about to graduate from high school. Normally, this would be a moment of joy, but I couldn't feel happy about it. The thought of making her a respectable adult, which had lingered in my mind since I decided to marry, was now a distant dream. "Hey, old lady, where's my t-shirt? Where did you put it? You didn't steal it, did you?" Emily began calling me old lady 2 years after we started living together. She used to be kind in the beginning. She gradually got used to me, but then suddenly started treating me rudely and calling me names. "Is this the t-shirt you're looking for?" I asked, taking it out of the folded laundry and handing it to her. "Why did you wash it? What if it shrinks? Normally, you should take it to the cleaners. You're so clueless, really, so dense." I had hand-washed and air-dried the t-shirt, thinking the fabric would be damaged at the cleaners, but I couldn't say this to Emily. All I could do was apologize. Emily snatched it from my hand, muttering, "You're so useless," before walking away. Her words were sharp, piercing my heart. I couldn't argue back. I just bowed my head. I couldn't understand why Emily had become so harsh with me. Initially, I thought it was because she was teased about her father's remarriage, but that didn't seem to be the case. Around the same time, Mark's attitude towards me also changed. He used to always be smiling, like when he was selling, but lately he had stopped smiling at home, becoming more sullen. He even started calling me "Hey you." Emily's behavior seemed to follow his lead. I thought maybe I was lacking in some way, so I tried not to cut corners with the housework and watched over Emily carefully. I wanted her to grow up to be a respectable adult, but contrary to my hopes, her attitude toward me worsened day by day. Calling me old lady had become the norm for her. I never heard words of gratitude from Emily anymore. What was strange was that at parent-teacher conferences in elementary school, Emily's behavior was normal, and she wasn't rude at all. Mark talked normally with Emily, even smiling sometimes. This meant that her terrible behavior was directed only at me, which hurt me even more. Even if I tried to talk to Mark, his attitude was distant, a complete change from before. I had no one to confide in, and I continued my life with a heavy, dark weight on my heart inside my home. I became more and more isolated within my own home. Since middle school, Emily had stopped telling me about her life, and Mark would attend her school events alone. I had to learn about school schedules from my neighbors. Mark and Emily seemed to get along well, often going out together. I longed to be treated as family by them, to live happily together, but that wish remained painfully unfulfilled. Mark's attitude towards me continued to worsen. Dust is piling up on the stairs. Clean it up. You're a stay-at-home wife, aren't you? The toilet paper is almost out. Are you even cleaning the bathroom? You're really dense, you know. Remarks like these from Mark became frequent. When we first got married, we shared household chores. Mark had been doing housework while living with Emily, and he was happy at first to share the chores with me. But now I did all the housework. Mark used to say it was wrong for a stay-at-home wife to do everything, but now he expected it. Emily had been an easy child to take care of, but this somehow made things worse for me. When I tried talking to Mark, he dismissed it as my lack of effort. Everything seemed to be my fault, and the more I tried talking to him, the heavier my heart felt. He constantly nitpicked my housekeeping, criticizing me. You can't even clean properly. No improvement after all these years. Do you lack learning ability? Mark looked down on me with disdain, and all I could do was apologize. I'm sorry. I'll try harder. Please forgive me, I would say. Mark would sigh dramatically, as if exasperated. Even if you try hard, you won't be able to do it. That's why you get scolded. Always saying you'll do it, but have you ever? His words kept chipping away at my heart. As time passed, I remained worn out, and Emily turned 18. I was curious about Emily's plans after graduation, but neither she nor Mark would tell me. By then, I had stopped talking to them unless absolutely necessary. One day, I overheard them discussing her future. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I wanted to know, so I listened until the end. I got it. I can go to college on a recommendation, and I even got a scholarship. Thanks to you, Dad. Thank you. Emily's voice was filled with joy, a tone she never used with me. Good for you. It's the result of your efforts. All the housework we dumped on that dense housekeeper was worth it. Were they referring to me as the housekeeper? Yeah, she was a good outlet for stress. I heard their mocking laughter. Quietly, I left and locked myself in the bathroom, the only place I could be alone. I crouched there, holding my head, and cried. To think that Mark and Emily saw me in such a light after all I had endured for the past 10 years. No matter how close my heart came to breaking, I continued being Emily's mother and Mark's wife. Even when I felt at my limit, when my heart screamed in pain, I forced myself to keep going. I made lunchboxes, prepared breakfast, did laundry, and all the other housework. It hurt even to lie down, but I feared that if I stopped, I would never again be needed by Mark and Emily. Driven by this fear, I continued to live in exhaustion. I don't remember much about this period. One day, after going shopping, a neighbor told me something shocking. Tomorrow was Emily's high school graduation. I couldn't admit I didn't know, so I just smiled vaguely and left. As soon as I got home, I collapsed onto the sofa. I had always thought about making Emily a respectable adult. Graduation from high school was supposed to be a milestone for that. Once again, I was the only one left out in this house. I'm forbidden to have a smartphone or use a computer. The only thing I have is a simple flip phone that can only make calls. Since Mark handles all the school communications, I don't have any mom friends or ways to get information about the school. I learned about sports days and recitals from neighbors or overheard children's conversations and secretly attended them. I wanted to properly attend the high school graduation and celebrate Emily's step into adulthood. While I was crying on the sofa, Emily came home from school. Old lady, why are you loafing around? It's so gloomy. You make the whole house dark. Can't you do something about it? Emily glared at me. It was her fault I felt this way. If she had told me the date of the graduation, I wouldn't have been left out for the first time. I felt anger rising from the depths of my heart. So the graduation is tomorrow. Seems you didn't tell me about it, I said, my tone edged with blame. Emily looked a bit startled by my confrontational words, but then sighed dramatically. So what? You're not going to the graduation anyway, so you don't need to know the date, she retorted. I reacted with surprise, tilting my head. I never said I wasn't going to the graduation. Don't come. If a plain old lady like you comes, you'll just be a laughingstock. It's my big day. Absolutely do not come, Emily said. Her words made me dizzy. To her, I was just an embarrassing presence. Just this once, I had hoped for forgiveness, but it was denied. Her words pierced my heart. I was truly just a nuisance, clearly told so by Emily herself. That night, Mark came home with a suit in a dry cleaner bag. He had taken it to the cleaners himself, without asking me. Of course, he knew about Emily's graduation. When I saw the suit, Mark commented, "Right, you didn't hear about it from Emily." He looked at me with a mix of pity and a smirk. Clearly, I was the least needed in this house. Thinking I was part of the family was just my own delusion. At that moment, I realized my heart had reached its limit long ago. I decided to end my role as a family member. The next day, Mark and Emily left together for her high school graduation. I was left behind, and Mark even told me not to bother with dinner as they would eat out. I wasn't invited. The old me would have just silently accepted this treatment, but those days were over. I had decided to leave this house. It was a decision whose time had come. As soon as Mark and Emily left the house, I quickly packed my things, left a note, and walked out. I couldn't be part of their family anymore. I decided to seek refuge at my parents' house, a 2-hour train ride away. There, I would prepare to sever ties with Mark and Emily. The note I left stated my wish to cut familial ties and live independently, and that further details should be discussed through a lawyer. I hadn't found a lawyer yet, but I knew my father could recommend one. My family home is owned by a wealthy family with extensive land holdings. My father, a well-known figure in the area, owns considerable real estate. Among his contacts, I knew there would be a lawyer. I remembered meeting one during a New Year's greeting at home. Another task I had to undertake was selling the house where Mark and Emily currently lived. This house was built on land owned by my father, and the construction was funded by him as a wedding gift for me. I had been repaying my father slowly with the money I earned from my real estate job, which was also introduced by him. The house, including both the building and the land, is owned by my father and legally registered in his name. At the time, Mark might have thought the house was a gift and never asked about the ownership, probably afraid of offending my father and losing the gift. Mark was the classic home tyrant, bullish with those he perceived as weaker but obsequious to those above him. When I reached my parents' house, I told my father everything that had happened. As I spoke, tears flowed uncontrollably, and I had to pause several times due to sobbing, but my father listened to the end. I saw tears in his eyes too. The most relieving part was that my father didn't criticize my initial decision to marry Mark. Instead, he said, "You've been through a lot." Afterward, he made several phone calls, and soon, lawyers and real estate managers arrived at the house. Everything happened quickly from there. It was decided that the house would be demolished, with the demolition scheduled for a week later. I wrote in the note, "Please leave within a week." My father commented sarcastically, "That's quite kind of you." For me, it was just to avoid any later complaints. During the week, I consulted with the lawyer about the divorce and shared the whole story with my mother. We cried together, and I can't forget the fleeting look of fierce determination on her face. I also discussed my future plans with my father. The priority was to establish a new foundation for my life. It took courage to talk to my parents, and it was painful, but once I did, my heart felt lighter. For the first time in 10 years, I slept soundly. A week later, while I was peacefully staying at my parents' house, I received a call on my cell phone. As expected, it was Emily. Honestly, I didn't want to talk to her, remembering how she had treated me. A black stain spread in my heart. I decided to ignore the call. However, the calls didn't stop, and there were several from Mark as well. They were probably contacting me about the note I left, or maybe the demolition company had contacted them. For 10 years, Mark and Emily continuously called me old lady and you, exploiting my efforts and treating me like a mere tool. I had endured such inhumane treatment for a long time. The thought of dealing with them again made me shudder, but I couldn't keep running away. To move forward, I needed to settle the past, and without confronting them, I wouldn't feel at peace. After the way they treated me, I felt I owed them a proper response. I steeled myself and answered the phone. "Hey, old lady, where are you right now?" Emily's screeching voice pierced my ears. Her tone was hurried and laced with panic, leaving such a ridiculous note. "You think you'll be forgiven? Where are you now? Come back home right now." I could hear Mark's voice as well. They both seemed to be in a state of panic. I imagined Emily's reaction when she returned from her graduation ceremony to find no old lady to vent her stress on or to serve as a substitute maid. Moreover, there was the note about divorce and leaving the house. Even if it wasn't Emily, anyone would panic. And it happened on the day of her bright graduation ceremony. I couldn't help but let out a faint smile at Emily's frantic state. Who is this, please?" I responded. Emily seemed taken aback by my unexpected response and stumbled over her words. I hung up the phone. Afterward, I called the real estate management company to confirm when the demolition would start. It was scheduled for tomorrow as planned, and Mark had already been informed. I requested to postpone the demolition to the day after tomorrow and asked them to inform Mark about the delay. This gave them one more day. Mark would probably come here. That's when I would deliver my final blow to Mark and Emily. I ignored the dozens of calls from them. The next day, around noon, I heard the doorbell ring and the sound of knocking on the door. It must be Mark and Emily. They would have wanted to come earlier, but the journey here could be terribly long due to poor connections. Mark and Emily appeared, panting heavily, evidently having rushed here. I had arranged beforehand for my parents to stay back in another room, so it seemed like I was the only one at home. I led Mark and Emily into the living room. Mark entered hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable around my father. My father is a wealthy and well-respected man in town with a commanding presence. He is, in a sense, a higher authority than Mark. On the other hand, Emily didn't seem intimidated at all. She appeared fully intent on overpowering me and bringing me back home. Emily plopped down on a chair in the living room, crossing her legs and gesturing silently for me to sit opposite her. I took my time preparing tea, moving leisurely before finally sitting across from her. Emily, growing impatient, addressed me. "What's the meaning of all this?" Mark, sitting next to her, placed the note I had left on the table. I didn't react, just silently met Emily's gaze. She averted her eyes first, attempting to dispel the awkwardness with a laugh. "What was that? Who is this?" "Hacked yesterday. Pretty poor performance." I continued to silently stare at Emily. She became visibly uncomfortable under my gaze, shifting in her seat and continuing, "Look, it's no use. A dumb old lady like you can't survive without us. You're nothing but trash." I almost reacted to her harsh words but restrained myself, noticing the tremble in her voice. Emily was clearly bluffing. Mark had been silent, just watching how things unfolded. "Stop being stubborn and come back home," Emily said, trying to confuse and coax me back with her cruel words. As Emily became more agitated, I responded calmly, "I don't have a family, do I?" "Oh, I have parents, but you two are not my family, are you?" Emily, clearly out of her element, raised her voice. "What are you saying? Dad and I are your family, right?" "Right, Dad." Emily, feeling at a disadvantage alone, sought support from Mark. Mark looked around nervously, and once he confirmed they were alone, turned to me with newfound bravado. "That's right. You can't live without us, just like Emily says. So you're coming back." Mark started getting bossy all of a sudden when he noticed my parents were nowhere to be seen. Looking back on it now, what a small-spirited man he is. "Like I said, I have no family," I repeated firmly. I replied firmly, no matter what Mark and Emily said, I would continue to treat them as strangers. They were not my family. If they were, they wouldn't have treated me like a slave. A true family supports and helps each other, especially when someone is in trouble. But Mark and Emily were different. For 10 years, they treated me like a servant, a vent for their stress. They insisted this was normal, oblivious to how wrong and cruel it was, unconsciously oppressing me. I marveled at how I endured it for 10 years, almost impressed with myself. This started when I saw Emily peeking out from behind Mark's back. I had bound myself with a promise to raise her to be a decent adult. I endured and served them for this promise at least until Emily graduated high school. I had decided that Emily's high school graduation and her moving on would mark the end of our relationship. I had held a faint hope that if Mark and Emily changed their ways and improved their attitudes towards me by the time of her graduation, I would continue walking with them as a family. But they betrayed my expectations, leading to this situation. Everything was decided the day before the graduation ceremony. So now I confront them with the appropriate attitude. Mark and Emily are no longer my family. Therefore, I will not treat them as such. Realizing the significance of my treating Mark and Emily as strangers, Emily altered her approach. "We're family, aren't we, Mom? Stop this silly act, please." Suddenly, she switched from calling me old lady to Mom, realizing her usual tactics wouldn't work. Mark, swallowing hard, watched Emily and me intently. "Even though you're not my birth mother, we've lived together all this time, so please listen to my request." Her previously defiant posture had changed to one more pleading. I looked at her steadily and replied, "I have no obligation to respond to requests from someone who isn't family." I replied, maintaining my composure and emotional distance. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she looked at me desperately. "Please, listen to me. The note you left, it's not true, right? You can't really be selling the house. It's not serious, right? Because you're part of our family." Emily's use of the term "mom" made my skin crawl, especially since her main concern seemed to be the house. Her anxiety about losing it was palpable, but it was clear that her focus was on the property rather than on me. It was true that the house would be gone, but it seemed that as long as she had somewhere to live, it didn't matter whether I was there or not. No matter how much Emily pleaded, my feelings remained unchanged. She lowered her face, seemingly crying. "This has to be some kind of joke, right? You can't be serious." Mark, upset by Emily's tears, turned his anger toward me. "What's with that note? Come back right now and stop the demolition." Mark's words were rapid and full of fury. "I can't do that. The decision has been made," I said in a restrained voice. "Do you think you can get away with treating me like this?" Mark and Emily refused to listen. "Please understand, I've already told you we're not family," I reiterated, wondering how many times I had to repeat myself. Suddenly, Mark stood up and slammed his fist on the table. I was startled but managed to stay calm. "Who's joking? After not treating me as family for 10 years, you can't suddenly expect me to act like one. It's impossible." My voice rose more sharply than I intended. "I'm angry too. I don't always show it, but there's a seething anger inside me ready to erupt like magma. Mark and Emily's selfish actions are unforgivable. They've trampled on my 10 years of hellish suffering and my efforts to rise above it. I tried to be a family with them, but they rejected it, mocking and using me. They'll never understand how lonely and painful it was to be left out. I had wished so many times to be treated like family, but that wish never came true. After 10 years of persistent effort to build a meaningful relationship with Mark and Emily, this is the outcome." A bitter, self-mocking smile spread across my face. Seeing my dry smile, Mark and Emily stared at me in shock. Mark seemed to lose his strength, slumping into the chair. Despite their inability to understand my feelings, they continued to exploit me until the very end. No matter how much I cared for them, they never reciprocated. They used the notion of family as a convenient excuse only when they needed something from me. I felt not just a headache but also a wave of nausea. Reflecting on why I tolerated them for so long seemed pointless now. There is no future for the three of us, Mark, Emily, and me, together anymore. My only goal now is to make them acknowledge their guilt and face the consequences. I no longer expect or trust anything from either of them. Mark stood up and apologized, his voice trembling. "I'm really sorry. Please come back, I beg you." But his apology did nothing to touch my heart. I wouldn't offer help or consider living together again. "Stop it. I'm no longer your family. I'm a stranger now." Emily joined in, her voice pleading. "I'm sorry. Please forgive me. We're family, so let's go home together." I was astounded by her self-serving words. After treating me like a stranger for a decade, now she wants me to come back because we're family. It was naive to think I would agree. Unable to stay calm, I let my emotions take over. Words I had restrained out of consideration for them now flowed freely. Harsh truths escaped my lips, truths I had been holding back. I don't want to hear any more excuses. I can't trust a single word from either of you. I couldn't imagine us ever being a family again. With that thought firmly in mind, I placed a divorce paper in front of Mark. It was already signed by me. Fill in your part and I'll submit it, I instructed firmly. Mark shook his head in denial, showing me a forced smile. Think it over, will you? I was taken aback by Mark's lack of grace and his small-minded attitude. His ingratiating smile, which I had once mistaken for kindness, now seemed nothing more than a manipulative facade. It still injured me to recall how I had misjudged him. I stood up and called for my parents. When they entered the room, Mark's jaw nearly dropped in shock. My father's eyes were sharp, and my mother wore a stern expression. Mark visibly recoiled under their gaze. I'm sorry for the trouble caused by Linda's misdeed, Mark began, but his words were met with confusion. What misdeed of mine? I wondered aloud, taken aback by his attempt to shift blame. My father's eyebrows twitched with irritation, but he remained silent. Linda didn't leave the house because of any misdeeds. She left because of your behavior, he said. Mark tried to defend himself, prompting Emily to back him up. Linda's so-called misdeed is ridiculous, my father's voice boomed, causing the windows to rattle. Mark and Emily gasped, their breaths caught in their throats. My father loomed over Mark, glaring fiercely. How dare you interpret Linda's actions as selfish? You only think of yourself. You're a small man, he said scornfully. Turning to Emily, my father continued, and you've been complicit in these disgraceful actions. Emily trembled, clearly terrified. My father stood tall, his authority undeniable. Emily, I've looked into your conduct at school as well. You've been extorting money from a classmate. The victim was too frightened to speak up, but we have arranged a criminal complaint. Emily's face blanched. That's a lie, she exclaimed, clearly more concerned about saving face than showing remorse. It became clear to me that she had no genuine regret for her actions. And Mark, my father continued, you've been embezzling money from your company. This was discovered during our investigation. Mark's face turned pale, but he showed no real remorse. It was evident that neither he nor Emily were willing to take responsibility for their actions. My mother then stepped in, her voice commanding, enough of this. Sign the divorce papers and leave this house immediately. Mark, sobbing, could only mutter incoherently, unable to find the words to defend himself. Though I had no desire to be harsh, Mark's resignation was clear when my father handed him a pen. He reluctantly signed the divorce papers. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 7:00 p.m., and the last train leaving town was at 7:30 p.m. If they missed it, they wouldn't have another chance until morning. In this small town, taxis were non-existent. Missing the train meant Mark and Emily would be stranded until the next day and likely miss the demolition scheduled for tomorrow. They probably hadn't packed, believing they could convince me to change my mind. As I hesitated, Emily abruptly spoke up in a sulky tone, but this divorce was your idea, right? Dad, you should pay alimony. Her attempt at deflection took both my parents by surprise. That's impossible. What you've done is essentially domestic violence. A crime, my father said sternly. Emily, momentarily stunned, retorted defiantly, show me the proof. I placed a notebook on the table. This is a diary I've kept since we got married. Emily's scornful look deepened. You don't even have a smartphone or computer. What kind of evidence could a diary provide? A diary is a valid form of evidence, not just video, audio, or pictures, I explained calmly. Even the lawyer acknowledged it as substantial evidence. Mark and Emily, seemingly defeated, slumped in their seats. I checked my watch dramatically. Well, you've missed the last train. You won't be able to get home tonight. My mother smirked at them. That's right. There are no taxis around here. I wonder if there's even a decent hotel nearby. All right, we're done here. Get out now, I said firmly. From the second-floor balcony, I watched as Mark and Emily hurried toward the station, clearly disbelieving that the last train had already left. Observing their flustered retreat, I felt a weight lifting from my heart. Though there were still loose ends, a sense of closure began to settle in. Unable to find a taxi, Mark and Emily spent about an hour walking to find a hotel. By the time they got home the next day, the demolition had already begun. They managed to salvage only their clothes. Unbeknownst to them, I had stored the furniture, appliances, and my belongings in a warehouse. Later, my lawyer reported that the divorce and alimony claims were finalized. Mark, initially resistant, was forced to comply after pressure was applied to his company. According to the detective agency, Mark was fired for embezzlement, and Emily's scandal led to her expulsion from high school, ruining her college prospects. Now jobless, Mark could only afford a small, run-down apartment far from the station, where he lived with Emily, who had dropped out of high school. Their relationship was strained, marked by endless arguments as Emily blamed Mark for everything, and Mark criticized her in turn. Having left my part-time job at the real estate agency, I was considering my next steps when my father suggested I help with the family business. I took a position at his resort property management company. The transition from city life to a resort area has been refreshing, surrounded by nature. I also adopted a dog, which has alleviated my loneliness. For now, this dog is all the family I need, and I plan to live a peaceful life with just me and my new companion.